So for the youth of Canada, especially those that are about to embark on a university and college education, like I am, and enter the workforce, what should we know about the political system, banking system, and the future prospects for our lives as Canadian citizens?
Well, I think that's the group that should be most interested, probably, because they're going through the educational system and need a lot of money. Because tuition fees are far, far higher than they were years ago when we were getting some assistance from the Bank of Canada. And also, in most cases, if they don't have very rich parents, they have to borrow it and pay interest on it. And it's really not fair, you know, because for $50,000, if you borrow that much, all the banks need is just 5% of that, of what I call blood, sweat, and tears money to create your $50,000. But then you have to pay back $50,000 in blood, sweat, and tears money plus interest. Not fair. So what we would hope would be the result of the new social contract would be that there would be enough money to make education more readily available to everyone, to lower tuition fees, as is being demanded in some areas of the country in particular, and also that loans would be available at very low interest rates, and for anybody that really needed to have to borrow, and some would still, of course, but it would make it much easier for them. And then, of course, after you graduate, there are jobs to go to, which is also part of the equation.
What challenges do the youth of Canada face today that we're not being made aware of, and do you have any advice for us?
Yeah, the challenge really is that the government is going down the path of borrowing money from the banking system, and some of it from international banks and others who are just obscenely rich, and putting us in a position where we'll be further in debt and have to pay more interest in the years to come, when they could use the Bank of Canada creatively and relieve us of the necessity of going further into debt. Now that is a big one. And the other thing they're doing, they're talking about an infrastructure bank. Well, we need an infrastructure bank like we need a hole in the head, because we have one. The Bank of Canada is our infrastructure bank. And it was used for all of these huge projects after World War II until 1974. So we have an infrastructure bank, and we don't have to let them set up a system where a few of the richest people in the whole planet are able to come in and buy up our ports and our airports and other assets for as little as 5 cents on the dollar, which is the present case. And you know, these things are not known to the people. If the people understood them, I think, as Henry Ford said, there would be a revolution before morning. Well, he was exaggerating, but that is the idea. It's because people don't understand what we're talking about, and because they're not educated in it at school, because it's not taught at school, that the people who are running the world are able to get away with this grand larceny, and have been for 200 or 300 years, and it's been getting worse and worse right from the beginning. When at the time the Bank of England was first established, they only had a ratio of 2 to 1, which is what we're suggesting. But then over the years, they kept building it up and building it up until it finally was 20 to 1, which, as I said, is nothing but legalized stealing.
Right. Do you have any advice for parents concerned about the future of their children?
Yes. Insist that your government use common sense and listen to the people for a change. Instead of listening to the 1/10 of 1%, the ones who are responsible for the trade agreements, because the trade agreements are not really trade agreements. They're called free trade agreements, but that is deceptive. They are really agreements to transfer power from the people to the transnational corporations and the international banks. And that was what was planned from the beginning. It's part of the takeover of the people at the top. I call them the cabal, but they want to have the control of the world and run it their way for their benefit. And so they devised this thing called globalization, and hired a bunch of academics to write articles on how great it was, paid them a bunch of money, as was written at the time, and of course they recognized it was going to result in a greater differentiation in income between rich and poor, and between rich countries and poor countries. But they never offered any solution. And here we are years later with no solution. And of course, some of the people are being able to catch on to what's going on. And the election recently in the United States was people saying enough is enough already. You have gone for your globalization. You have transferred our good manufacturing jobs from the United States to Mexico and China and other places. And we want jobs. Yet the banking system doesn't allow them to create new jobs to replace the ones that have gone. Mm-hmm. So I can understand why people are upset, and they should be. And they should be upset enough to make their governments do right by them.